Basically, a plant only grows in the top 10 inches of the soil. And that's what you really have to worry about. Nobody's planting corn at 2 feet. The soil at 2 feet wouldn't grow anything. The microbes aren't living down that far. So we started with an inch of less or topsoil. And we've got it up to 10 inches of topsoil. Well, every time I add this, now let's say that's an average of 3 inches of compost. But by the end of the year, it'll be about an inch. And then we'll put 5, 6, 8 inches of leaves on top of it. And by next spring, those leaves will be down to maybe 2 inches of matted down leaves, maybe a ½ inch of composted leaves. And then the rest will be in various stages of decomposition. And so we turned it all in. But by adding this, every year you can add this to the top and your soil grows taller. So if I can't get down through the clay that's 10 inches below this ground, over time I'll have 11, we're probably pushing 11, and over time we'll have 11, 12 inches. I'm not going to get but so much, but if I put this on the camera on the ground, I'm going to experiment with this because I'm just doing this on the fly. I don't know if you can see it, but the garden is actually higher than the soil out here because of what I've been adding to it all these years. And where we live has some of the best growing soil in the state of Virginia. And we have 16 feet of topsoil. And the reason I know that is we had to hook onto the sewer system years ago, and they had to dig that deep out in the front street, took it to the pipe, and that's when we saw sand. And that's why it'll grow anything. You just got all that great soil. And there are no worms in this county. There's no worms in this soil. And I can take you over that compost and throw it on the ground, and if I had the cameraman, I would say that that wheelbarrow has at least 12, 15 big worms in it, and when you uncover them, they go wiggling all over the place. Well, we bought our worm casings down here in our compost from our yard, and we slowly started getting worms. Now, 2 years ago it rained, it was a drought, which hurt the worms. And then last year it was a monsoon, which hurt the worms. And each time we plowed it, there weren't as many worms. They weren't really nice, healthy looking. This year when I plowed this, each row had 20 in it. And they were wiggling and jumping everywhere when the plow blade went through it. And it very rarely cuts one or kills one. And worms help you. There's nothing like worms. If your soil doesn't have worms in it, you got problems and you can't grow anything. And if you got worms, you can grow stuff in your soil. And I have worms here. This ground out here is so hard there couldn't be a worm alive in it. No worm can get through this. Anyway, this isn't just an arbitrary place on this place. This is all over. And what surprises me is how we can get grass to grow in 1 inch of topsoil. I reckon it's thank heavens for Scott's grass fertilizers. Years ago in our garden at home, we had 516 square feet of raised beds, and they were double timbered, so we had about 6, 7 inches of soil above the ground level of the yard. And we had a lady at a chicken coop, and we used to go over there and voluntarily clean out her chicken coop just to get what was in it. And that, as long as it's cured and aged, that is the greatest stuff you can put on a garden. The stuff you get out of a chicken coop. Now, if it is raw and fresh and hot, if you put chicken manure up against that plant, it'll kill them all. It'll burn them up. It has to be aged. The next thing is cow manure. And the next thing would be horse manure. But the trouble with the horse is he eats a lot of seeds, and the seeds go completely through him as seeds. They don't break down. So when you get horse manure, if you don't put it in a compost pile or put it in a pile where it can heat up and kill those seeds, you get more weeds than the manure's worth. We learned that the hard way. But that's the best stuff you can put on your garden. Rabbit manure, goat manure is fine. But anything like we cleaned out horse stables, and that stuff is pretty hot. You can't use it. Well, we brought it home, put it on there in our 3-bin compost bins. And we had a 55-gallon barrel, and I put a valve on the bottom and a pipe, put it up on cinder blocks, and we put wire mesh, 2 layers of wire mesh on the bottom, put the manure in that, filled it up with water, put a lid on it, and we watered our garden and watered our potted plants with manure tea, and that really perks them up. Well, that's all I know about soil and how to improve it, and it's worked for us and it can work for you. You can do it on a small scale, you can do it on a big scale. But you can give it a try. If you got poor soil, you can look at it. I've seen videos where somebody took a little Manus plow and they had the landscape timbers around it for a raised bed, but it was just sitting flat on the ground with no soil in it. And they'd take a Manus tiller and chop around on it, maybe get an inch into the ground. It was so poor. And then they planted their stuff in it. There's no way it can make it. It's not going to do really well. It's not going to grow tomatoes that 4 days later I've got to tie them up again because they're starting to get taller. Give it a try. Improve your soil. Don't take everything out of it and not put anything back. Even if you just put leaves over it. See, we put leaves over it because we don't want to have all these weeds in this garden every year and starting from fresh. Because by the time you put it away and pull your garden after the first frost, last year was about 3rd week of October, it was really early. We've had it as late as December the 8th. Nothing like picking tomatoes on December the 8th to ripen up at home. But from then until it gets cold, and then when it gets warm in March and you're not fooling with your garden yet, all those weeds are growing. And if I didn't have this covered with leaves, I'd come down there like a fresh yard. You'd have all those weeds starting all over. Well, it's a lot easier to come down here when you have soft soil under the leaves. It saves you a lot of work. And what are you going to do with the leaves? Take them to landfill? Now, I get leaves from all these neighbors. I got a lady down there, and I get her leaves up. I cut the community area for grass. I go up a street and get leaves up from around those trees over there that are hardwoods, because that's the best thing. Oak leaves are the best. Hickory are next. But oak leaves is the best thing you put on a garden. And if you got one of those things that shreds and chops them up and picks it up, boy, that'll break down quick in a compost pile. We put them in whole leaves, and it might take 6, 8 months to a year to break down. But compost works every time it's been tried. Thanks for watching my channel. Hopefully this information will help you a little bit.